So I'm here to talk about a nuclear detonation. It's kind of a big topic, I know, but I want to set the stage first by saying about a decade ago, we had a workshop at the National Academies, and there was a responder from Chicago, Joe Newton, who was there. And he said, I don't know what perfect looks like. If we do everything right after a nuclear detonation, we got no idea what that looks like. And it's no wonder. If you went online, you could find preparedness guidance that would say, you should shelter. And other preparedness guidance say, you should evacuate. So if we can't answer the basic question of should you run or should you hide when you see a mushroom cloud, how can we possibly prepare? Now, I had the good fortune of working with state and local emergency management agencies across the US, and I took away a few observations in doing that. The first is, nobody really has a plan for the aftermath of a nuclear detonation. In particular, what we were looking at originally was this low-yield, ground-level nuclear terrorism event. And in fact, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the response needs even are, and what the role of federal, state, and local agencies is. I get two basic reactions. One is, it doesn't matter, we're all dead anyway, right? And the other one is, nuclear detonation, that's a Fed thing, right? Wait for the guys in green to show up and save the day. Well, unfortunately, both of those reactions lead to an apathy in planning that could get hundreds of thousands of people killed or injured. Why? The critical decisions, the most important life-saving decisions, are those made in the first few minutes and hours of the event. And those are not going to be coming from Washington, D.C. Those are going to be things that the state and local communities need to do, and they need to be prepared to do them. So let's walk through a scenario. Since we're in Washington, D.C., I thought I'd take 1600 K Street, just down the street from here, and we're going to simulate what a 10-kiloton nuclear detonation might do to this city. So the first thing to understand is that a 10-kiloton nuclear detonation gives off a bright flash of light, the equivalent of 1,000 suns if you were standing a mile away. 10 kilotons is about the same as 5,000 Oklahoma City truck bombs all going off at once. We're going to use real weather from noon on February 14th, 2009. Happy Valentine's Day. And we're going to use casualty numbers based on workday population in DC. Now, we've done all this modeling and analysis using some advanced techniques. After that workshop, we really got the scientific community together, all the federal agencies who had some understanding of what a nuclear detonation might mean. And we came together to try and solve this problem. So the information you're about to see provides some background. The first thing to understand is a 10-kiloton nuclear detonation is probably going to destroy just about everything out to half a mile. It's considered the severe damage zone. The next zone is the moderate damage zone. This goes from half a mile to a mile. Still a lot of destruction, but more survivors than fatalities. This is actually a focus of our emergency response, because the people in that moderate damage zone are going to need help. To give you an idea what it might be like if you were a mile away from a 10 kiloton, I put together a little animation. So this would be the outer edge of that moderate damage zone. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get that bright flash of light, followed quickly by a thump. That thump is a shock wave being transmitted through the earth, which moves faster than the air blast, which will come several seconds later, blowing the glass into buildings, causing injury, but also bringing the facades of the building down. So from an event like this, in a built-up urban area, you can have tens of feet of rubble and debris in the streets just from all that material falling in. So as an emergency manager, if you're planning on evacuating people or bringing resources in, you need to understand what that condition is going to be like and how it's going to impact your response. So the third blast damage zone I want to talk about is the light damage zone. Light damage zone is defined by a couple different areas. The first thing to understand is that even at 3 miles away, glass is being broken with enough force to cause injury to somebody standing behind that window. That bright flash of light causes something called flash blindness. It's not permanent, maybe only 15 seconds or a minute. If you're standing on a street corner, it's not a big deal. But you and everybody around you driving down the freeway at 60 miles an hour is suddenly blind. You can imagine what that's going to do to our thoroughfares. Flash blindness during the day can go out 10 miles or more. That's the Beltway. So if you're planning on moving resources around, keep in mind, roads are probably going to be blocked. At night, flash blindness can go much further. All this went into trying to define that light damage zone. That light damage zone goes from 1 mile to 3 miles. Most people in that zone are not going to be injured. And the types of injuries that we might expect in that zone are probably going to be lacerations from flying glass or maybe some minor crush injury from things falling on you. These pictures were taken 1.5 miles away from a solid rocket fuel booster facility that blew up in Henderson, Nevada. It was about the equivalent of a 1 kiloton explosion. And at 1.5 miles away, it still had enough shock to pop that roof of that warehouse in and blow that glass across that office building. All right, so we've had our 3 zones, our severe damage zone, our moderate damage zone, and our light damage zone. So these are the prompt effects, the blast waves that are going to come out from a 10 kiloton. The next thing we need to worry about is fallout. Now, fallout is formed when the fireball from the explosion, which is so hot, it actually shoots up at over 100 miles per hour. That fireball sucks up dirt and debris with it, thousands of tons of dirt and debris. And it mixes with all the radioactive material that was generated during the nuclear explosion to create fallout. This fallout cloud will rise over the first few minutes after the event, stabilize maybe at 5 miles into the atmosphere. Now, to sort of visualize what that cloud is doing with time, we've sort of exported our models into this display. So you can see those sort of purple ping pong balls, those represent what the cloud is doing. The color changes on the ground represents what happened after those fallout particles get back to the ground and the radiation levels that they give off. So I'm going to show you what's happening over the first few hours of this event. You can see the clock in the upper right-hand corner. 2 hours, the bottom part of the cloud is swept over BWI. You notice it only took an hour for the top part of the cloud to get out over the Atlantic? That's because at 5 miles, the winds are going a lot faster than on the ground, and often in a different direction. So if you go like this, and okay, which way is the cloud going to go? You probably are going to guess wrong. And your chances out running that cloud aren't that great to begin with. Now I'm going to keep the clock going forward, 3 hours, 4 hours. You can see there was actually a wind shift in the afternoon, and some of that material started coming back down. 6 hours in, you can see the expanse of the contaminated area. 12 hours now, you're going to see something strange happen. It's actually shrinking. And the reasons it's shrinking is we define these zones by the radiation levels. And that's the silver lining of our fallout cloud. Radiation decays, and actually fairly rapidly. Radiation from the fallout gives off half of its energy in the first hour, 80% in the first day. What you're concerned about is not breathing fallout. It's these salt and sand-sized particles that come down to the ground, land, and give off this penetrating gamma radiation. Avoiding that gamma radiation is what you're trying to do when you protect yourself from fallout, which is why where you go after an event like this is really important. You want to go to a spot that gets you as far away from the fallout that's on the roof or on the ground and has as much mass between you and the fallout as possible. Now you can think of the numbers on the screen like SPF of sunscreen. The bigger the number, the better the protection. Getting into If you happen to be in a suburban neighborhood, getting to the middle of your house would be great. If you got a basement, even better. Even a half basement's fine. Getting into a basement can give you adequate protection. And if you're in an urban area like this, where most brick buildings, cement buildings, 3 or 4 story buildings, you've got great protection options. I'll also say that this building, I encourage you when you walk out to look up at it. This is a big brick building. There's a stairway going downstairs, so we know there's a basement. You could easily get protection factors of 100 or more in the core, the middle of this building, or in the basement. All right, so given the availability of sheltering, we asked the question, how many lives can be saved through sheltering? Well, in order to answer that question, I sort of need a control group. So if everybody in the scenario I just talked about for a Washington, D.C. explosion, if everybody stood outside for the first 24 hours, not the recommended strategy, but if everybody stood outside for the first 24 hours, we would have about 280,000 people that would get enough radiation exposure to make them sick or potentially kill them. But if those same people, all of the people in DC, just ran into a poor shelter, not that you can find a lot of poor shelters in DC, it takes a while to find a 1 or 2 story wood frame house, but if everybody ran into one of those, we would still save 150,000 people from significant exposure if everybody just went into a poor shelter. And if you went into what we consider an adequate shelter, which is, say, a half basement of a wood frame house, or the worst shelter location in this building, if you went to the top floor next to the roof or on the periphery of the building, you'd still have a protection factor of 10. We would save 245,000 people from significant exposure. And the people that did get some kind of exposure tend to be in the sick but not dead category. Now, I'll say in DC, it's not hard to find protection factor 50 or more. If everybody in DC were able to get in that protection factor 50, there's a basement in this building, the core of this building, or more, we'd have no fallout casualties, no fallout significant exposures. Fallout is a preventable casualty. And it takes time for the fallout to get to us. Remember that cloud? It's got to get up, cool, all those particles come back down. Even if you're close to the event, you've got at least 15 minutes before that material starts accumulating. So you've got time. So how long? That's the next question I get. All right, you sold me, we're going to shelter. How long do we have to hang out together? Because that candy machine ain't going to supply us for long. Well, remember that decay rate I talked about? So I've sort of circled in that yellow dashed line the dangerous fallout zone from this event. At 1 hour, it's about that size. The dangerous fallout zone is an area where you can actually get enough exposure to make you sick or potentially kill you. Now, as I move the clock forward, 2 hours, 3 hours, notice how quickly that's shrinking back. So you really just want to avoid being outside in the first few hours of this event. After a couple days, that dangerous fallout zone actually disappears. Now, there's still contamination. Don't get me wrong, your meters be clicking like crazy. But the radiation levels that cause that acute injury really decay away in the first few hours and days of the event. So out of all of this work in the science, a bunch of great guidance was developed. The planning guides for response to nuclear detonation and communication guides and health and safety guides have all been developed to help emergency managers understand and prepare for an event like this. And hopefully, we may never have to, but if you need to, help you respond. I'll simplify it though. It comes down to really a couple simple things. Get inside. Get inside the basement or the middle of the building, same place you would go for a hurricane or a tornado. Plan to stay there 12 to 24 hours. And stay tuned. AM/FM radio works best because outside of the area of impact, radio towers will still be working, and those messages and that transmission can get into the places that have been impacted. Okay, these days we get a lot of questions about, well, what about higher yields? What about missile-delivered things? Well, let me give you a quick comparison. So in the middle I have the 10 kiloton. That's what I've been talking about, sort of our improvised nuclear device concept. On the right is 100 kiloton. Now, yeah, it's definitely bigger. But the range of effect is only about twice as far. So these zones that I've been talking about, the severe damage zone, which goes out half a mile, the moderate, which goes from half a mile to a mile, it only doubles the range of those effects. What about an airburst? Well, we've got a couple of real-world examples with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those were detonated between 1,500 and 2,000 feet. And you'll notice something when you look at these pictures. Yes, there's that mushroom cloud, but the white cap, which was created during the explosion and has all the radioactive material created from the fission process, doesn't quite connect with all the dirt and debris that was pulled up. There's an air gap there. And in fact, the small fission products that were created in the explosion actually stay up in the upper atmosphere, which is why Hiroshima and Nagasaki had little or no fallout. So if a detonation occurs far enough off the ground that you don't get that mixing, you don't get a lot of local fallout. So we've got Duck and Cover 2.0. What does it mean for civil defense these days with all these various nuclear terrorism threats, nation-state threats? Well, if you have an imminent threat, if somebody's launching something at us, we'll know about it and generally have an opportunity to provide a warning. It may not be long, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but the same place that you went to protect yourself from fallout is a great place to go to protect yourself from the prompt effects, from the blast. Getting into the center of a building, getting into a basement of a building can provide a lot of protection, just like hurricanes and tornadoes. Now, Duck and Cover, Bert the Turtle from the Cold War, was really all about a no-notice attack. You see a bright flash, dive into the corner, cover your head. I don't think we need to go back there as a nation with that hypervigilance and waiting for the bomb. But if you are aware that there is a potential threat of an attack, and you see a bright flash, it's probably not a bad idea to duck down. Because what that helps with is avoiding potential blast effects and maybe even some of the thermal effects. And fallout. So fallout's the same regardless of whether it's a missile or detonate on the ground. If the detonation occurs close enough to the ground for that mixing of the fission products with the dirt and debris, you can generate fallout. The good news is it takes a while for that fallout to rise up and come back down. And there's a lot of places that you can go that can protect yourself from the penetrating gamma radiation from that fallout and really keep yourself safe, keep your family safe. Okay, get inside, stay tuned still works. I don't want to minimize it. This is definitely a catastrophic event. More than 750,000 people would be within those blast zones I talked about, 500,000 within that dangerous fallout zone. But there's a lot of resources in this area to help save lives, if we know what to do. If you go to a CDC website, you can see what it means to get inside, what it means to stay inside, and what it means to stay tuned. And guess what? As emergency managers, guess where you fall in? When that stay tuned pops up, they're looking for you to provide a message. And that message needs to be informed by situational awareness. Where's the best places to go? How do you avoid the fallout? What places are safe? What places aren't? Are you ready? There's a couple tools that DHS is developing to help you. This is called the Rapid Hazard Assessment Tool. And instead of, these detailed models, this one is just a simple put down a pie wedge. Bad stuff's probably going to be going in this direction. The idea is eventually this might be in an EOC, even without an internet connection, that will allow you to run these tools yourself and figure out where the potential impacted areas might be. If you want to plan, if you want to prepare for an event like this, there's a great tool called the City Planning Resource that FEMA has put together. And across the US, we've looked at all major cities, identified what the predominant weather patterns are of concern, done a variety of yields to look at the response needs, and built reports and analysis and GIS systems that allow you to put together a plan that's informed by good analysis and science. There's things that can help. I hope you think about, a little bit of preparedness, because just a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of preparedness can save a lot of lives. Thank you. Let people in.
Yeah.
Do not lock them out. And actually, decon is a lot easier than you might think. We actually did a lot of tests in the Nevada desert, and in our infinite wisdom, they actually had soldiers running around 30 minutes after the detonation and the fallout. Dry, dusty environment. The decon procedure, broom. This is dirt and debris. And so they brushed the soldiers off, they measured them, and verified that they were clean. So this isn't like a sticky residue that you're not going to be able to get off. Fallout is easy to remove. And in fact, when you look at the old civil defense, they say, take your hat off, and you see the fallout coming off of it. But yes, take your shoes off, take your outer layer of clothing off, and that will remove most of the fallout. And the important thing to think about here is that, remember that rapid decay? The fallout's most dangerous early. So getting it off fast is more important than getting it off thoroughly. So don't wait in line for the shower. A great question, and look, I think we've all been involved in exercises where there's a toxic material release, and it's like, okay, the response is over. All right, where's EPA? We'll hand it off. You know, it's really important to begin that recovery process when the event occurs. If you're in emergency management, please consider standing up that recovery-focused IMT almost immediately. They need to be thinking about things that will save lives and sustain lives while people are being rescued, because that recovery slope is overlapping with the response slope. There are a number of great documents that I would refer you to. The Nuke Rad Incident Annex is out there, as well as the federal planning guidance. And all of these offer you some suggestions on where to go to help the recovery process succeed. Just to put it into context, a 10 kiloton was used for improvised device planning because that's about the same size as our first nuclear device, Trinity, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, all sort of in that factor of 2 range of a 10 kiloton. I'll remind you that our first nuclear weapon, Trinity, was an implosion device. Highly technical, it worked. Our second nuclear device was Little Boy. It was an entirely different design. It was a gun-assembled device, which we used in warfare for the first time, and it worked. So, answer is not the technical challenge. There's not an overwhelming technical challenge. What we try to do is prevent people from getting the fuels that are necessary, which is the highly enriched uranium and plutonium, which is why we have such a strong non-proliferation effort out there. Also, as for size, within 7 years of our first nuclear weapon, we were firing them out of artillery shells.